And after waiting weeks for a council to clear algae from a lake in Buxton, a local man's pulled on his wellies and used a rake to do it himself. Thick green algae's been covering the boating lake in Pavilion Gardens.
A man and a mission to clean up a local lake that's been covered actually in thick green algae. Now, not only is it bad for the fish, it also means that those maybe in the habit of renting a pedalo in this Buxton park can no longer actually take
This
to the water.
wasn't planned. I didn't really aim to get onto the newspaper or the radio or the television. So I'm going to give my side of the story. The 6 weeks holidays. I'd worked 41 out of the 45 or 46 days of the 6 weeks. I worked pretty much all the way through. And I have to go back and forth, passing that lake. And so I saw it gradually getting worse. I say gradually, it was quite quick. The algae built up and up and up and up, way past the point of where I cleaned it last time before the 6 weeks. So I cleaned it before with no hassle from anybody. I didn't do a lot when I cleaned it the previous time. Other people carried on my work and did a lot better because we had a massive downpour and so we could push it through the system into the rest of the river. But it wasn't changing over the 6 weeks, and at the end of the 6 weeks, the little boats that are supposed to be running on the lake weren't, because there was that much algae that the pedalos would get stuck. And so clearly it was becoming an issue. The key part of Pavilion Gardens in Buxton is to make it monetisable, to make sure that it keeps a steady flow of income so the council can maintain it. That is what the income is there for, to maintain our wonderful park. However, when the income stops, supposedly the maintenance stops, but it turns out the maintenance stopped a long time ago. And this is the council negligence that led to this entire escalation. And I will happily shit on the council, because they did this to themselves. So, got sick of it. I knew it wasn't good for marine life. I didn't know exactly what type of algae it was on day one, but it didn't really matter. It looked ugly, there was rubbish sitting on the top, and I knew the marine life was slowly getting worse and worse, because it had been like this for almost 3 months, all the way past the island. So, as it says in the reports, I got my wellies on, I got a rake, a really poor rake, but it was the only rake that we could find in the family to begin with, and I just started scooping it out, putting it on the side, scooping out, putting it on the side. I spent 7 hours on day one just doing that, and I did move the algae, and I noticed on the lake the ducks were eating it. And the previous time when I cleaned it, this is why I mentioned it, it was dumped by other council workers in the park in a nice safe location away from people's pets, and it decomposed. The rats were eating it, as much as I don't really want to help the rats, and the ducks and other mammals were eating it totally fine with no issues. So I've just been storing it in different places along the gardens. But on the first day, I decided to do something different from the last time I cleaned the lake. Sort of a blackboard up, bit of chalk, that just said, this is why I'm doing it. I'm doing it on my own because, as far as I was aware at that point in time, the council had failed to take any responsibility. And I had asked around. My colleagues, they also did inquiries. They made sure of who owned the lake, who was responsible for maintaining, and asked, was there anything put in place? Nothing. Nothing was put in place. This lake has been here for a very long time, and there's been maintenance plans for a very long time. But for some reason, after COVID, these maintenance plans fell out of a window, and someone forgot about them. So instead of cleaning the drain at the bottom of the lake 3 times a year, nobody did it. It wasn't their responsibility. It was no one's. It was just a lake. And these cracks in the council and the caretakers and all these contracts, these complicated contracts that the council has formed around these gardens, showed themselves big time. So with this sign, said negligence, I said why I'm doing it, and I was raising money for Ukrainian charities on the board as well. instead of me doing like a charity bike ride to raise money, I'm doing something useful for the town. But I'm not going to talk too much about that. That's not the centre of this video. Now, the first person to give me grief was the head of the caretakers. Now, bear in mind, the caretakers in the garden work for a company called Alliance. Alliance service the High Peak Borough Council and Staffordshire Moorlands Council. They are a company that is basically designed to tick all the boxes for councils. In my mind, I've seen these companies operate before in services that I'm more adept to, in outdoor sport instructing, and they are not companies that care. It's my opinion. So, sadly, although some employees might care about the gardens, they get given a book of what they need to do today. Whilst I was cleaning the lake, some of the days they were leaf blowing. The leaves haven't even fallen yet. And so Alliance is slightly part of the issue. These build-up of contracts mean that maintenance plans fall out the window. Things that have been in place for a very long time get lost because it is now a contract's responsibility, not the council's. I'm going to keep ranting on about Alliance if I don't stop myself, so I'm going to stop there. But the head basically said, this algae is harmful for animals, you better shift it. And I just nodded my head. Now, for the rest of day one, not much escalation. I just carried on. I just raked poorly. It wasn't very efficient on the first day, and I was in the water. Stayed safe as possible, and I was doing it in the water because the first time I struggled a lot trying to do it from the sides. So I thought, I'll just get in. And I was totally fine, I was totally safe. That'll be important later. But the first day, that was pretty much it. It was a very nice day. A lot of people showed me support. Day 2, I started with a new rake. Yippee, go me. It was a lot more efficient, and I also had a wheelbarrow, so I could easily take the algae from A to B, hiding it away from pets and people's sights. I just carried on. I was in the lake that day as well, just like day 1. I was cleaning as much as possible, doing it a lot quicker this time round. And then we had a couple of council members, and of course the head of Alliance reappear his head. And they just surrounded me around this blackboard and went, "We are doing something, just so you know, so change the sign." I went, okay, I'll change the sign, but it doesn't really change my viewpoint on the council. And it really, really proves the point that nothing was in plan. Nothing was being done about this until I put that sign there. As soon as I put that sign there, you've come out the woodwork. And that shows a lot about the council. But I made that statement towards them and they just went, change the sign. I changed the sign. And I left it on the note of, I do not work for the council, nor can I comment on them. And they carried on their meeting. The meeting wasn't actually anything to do with the lake, it was to do with geese, which they have been talking about for probably the entirety of the year so far. Because the garden has too many geese, which doesn't help the algae. But they left me alone from that point, the haggle of council workers. Once they said they're doing something, they didn't explain what they're doing, they just said they're having chats. So I expect a result maybe in the next few years. But that wasn't the worst thing to happen on day 2. Day 2 also included a gentleman much further on later in the day, after the meeting had disappeared. And this gentleman stated he worked for the council. That was the only question I asked, did he work for the council, because I didn't want to give him the time of day. And I can't remember the full conversation, because I don't really want to. But I got asked questions such as, why am I doing it? What am I doing it for? Because he was under the belief that I was doing it selfishly, just for myself. Believed that no one had ever reported it, which was very contradictory to other council members that had talked to me previously in the day, which is very interesting. But the gentleman also asked questions such as if I had any illnesses, implying that I was mentally ill, because he was mainly just telling me to get out of the lake. He just despised the idea of me being in the lake. everything that I was doing at that point in time was for myself and against the council, and that I was enemy number one to him. And it escalated to the point where I just said, well, I'm not leaving, I'm going to clean the lake. And he said, I'm going to call the police. Well, that's exactly what he just did. And then 2.5 hours later, the PCSOs arrived as I was just about to pack up. I was waiting for them. And all the PCSOs could say was, don't go in the lake, which I agreed. I was like, well, I'll just keep going from the sidelines. The PCSOs were lovely. So day 2, it escalated quite a lot. I had interviews on day 2 and I believe day 3 as well. And that's from the media articles that you saw at the start. Now, going onwards, this is more than a week now. I started on Tuesday last week, and it is now Friday. And the lake is pretty much all cleaned now. I've pretty much done it myself. But these news articles have appeared, and with that, we've had responses by the High Peak Borough Council, because, of course, news articles have to make it fair. Now, the council haven't talked to me since day 3. Now, in day 3, one council member talked to my mother, so they haven't really talked to me. So I don't really know that much from what they said anyway. So I've not really had any response to the council since day 2 when all of it escalated. Now, on these reports online, their responses have been very contradictory. The council have been saying that it comes and goes naturally. True, it does, and it always has done in this lake. I'm not saying the algae has never been here, but when it appears, it's normally about a metre into the lake, and then it disappears again. It doesn't stay for very long. Definitely doesn't stay for 3 months and covers almost all of the lake. Now, the council states that it comes in hot weather, which it does, and disappears in the winter, which it might do, but it's never normally stayed that long for that to happen anyway. But then underneath, it says that they are getting professional contractor to remove the algae. So if it's going to disappear in winter, then why do you need somebody to remove it? A bit confusing. I've already removed it anyway, so that would be useless. And another article that's just appeared again today from the BBC, they stated that that contractor will then remove all the algae that I've taken out, which is now sitting on the sides of the lake, on the banks, which it most definitely isn't. Not a single council member has obviously seen the work that I've done, because it's not on the side of the lake, it's hidden away. Well, good luck for them finding it, because I'm not going to tell them where it is if they're going to act like this. They're being childish, and so I have to be childish back and make reports like this and talk to them in this manner, because they're treating me like a child, calling the police on me, if that person is a council member, and they're not treating me with any respect. All they could have done was really, thank you, we'll take it from here. That's all they could have said. But no, it escalated. And so we're at this point where I have to make this story to make things a little clearer for everybody. Now, in conclusion, this could have all been prevented if the council actually did their annual maintenance. Well, they do it 3 times a year, cleaning the drain out. If they actually did that maintenance, then the likelihood is that this algae wouldn't have appeared, because there would have been plenty of flow, so it couldn't have bunched up like it did. Because I pulled all sorts of gunk out of that drain, including construction bags and basically an entire forest, so it hadn't been done in at least 2 years. I know that because I work in the gardens and have witnessed zero work taking place at the lake. So really, this is all a story of council neglect and how one person can show so many cracks in a massive government organisation, a council, such as this, and cause a massive ruckus at the same time. So if you want to cause your own ruckus in your own council, I don't know, clean lake apparently. Have a lovely day.